Hello, and welcome to the fourth and final episode of my Western Railway Franchises mini-series. In this series, I've been looking at the operators and franchises of services across the west of England. Today, we are looking at the current operator of services across the West Country, Great Western Railway, who began operations in 1996 under the Great Western Trains brand, later being known as First Great Western. We covered the history of this operator from 1996 to September 2015 in a previous video. On the 20th of September 2015, First Great Western was rebranded into the Great Western Railway operator we know today, with GWR attempting to help see through the largest modernisation of the main line in years. In this video, I'll answer the question of whether or not Great Western Railway has been a success since its 2015 relaunch. If you do enjoy this video, please do consider liking, subscribing and joining my Patreon or YouTube channel membership, links in the description below. Thank you. We'll start with a little recap. The Great Western franchise was formed in April 2006, merging three different franchises together: the Intercity Great Western franchise, the Thames franchise, and the Wessex franchise. This meant that Great Western Railway, or First Great Western as they were known previously, would now operate to over 270 stations. They would operate out of Paddington towards Reading, Swindon, Oxford, Hereford, Bristol, Cardiff, Exeter, Plymouth and Penzance, whilst also operating regional and local services across the Thames Valley towards areas such as Marlow and Henley. First Great Western would operate to Gatwick, Southampton, Portsmouth, Weymouth, Exmouth, Paignton, Barnstaple, Falmouth, Yeovil, Westbury, Banbury, Severn Beach and Weston-super-Mare, with the new franchise seeing the addition of a major new upgrade to the Great Western Main Line, which would eventually see the line electrify from Paddington as far as Bristol Parkway and Cardiff, with brand new Intercity Express trains and Class 387s being ordered to replace older stock. However, the electrification was supposed to go much further, which we'll talk about later. First Great Western would change branding to Great Western Railway in September 2015, with a new dark green livery being adopted to all its trains to reflect the old Great Western Railway Company, which created the Great Western Main Line. As for fleet, by September 2015, GWR was operating a large fleet of all diesel stock. These included Class 143 Pacers, Class 150 Sprinters, Class 153 Super Sprinters, Class 158 Express Sprinters, Class 165 and Class 166 Networker Turbos, Class 180 Adelantes, and the Class 43 HST sets. Finally, who could forget the Class 57s, which hauled Mark III sleeper coaches on sleeper services to Penzance, known as the Night Riviera. The HSTs and 180s would be the units replaced by the new IET trains, the Class 800 and Class 802s, which would be bimode units, whilst the new Class 387 Electrostars would eventually replace Class 165 and 166s on local services out of Paddington, allowing those trains to be moved to local services across the West Country, replacing older Sprinter and Pacer trains. The first of these new trains would be planned to enter service in 2017. Anyway, now on to the new franchise, which started from September 2015, when the company changed branding. 2015 was a year of strikes for the operator, with RMT staff striking over the new IET trains, and GWR's desire for driver-only operation, with a solution eventually found just before the rebrand in August 2015, whereby conductors would remain on the new IET trains. More controversy hit GWR in March of 2016, when Great Western Railway adverts were banned by the Advertising Standards Authority for suggesting that services were owned by the public. GWR's poster campaign for its rebrand used the phrase, "The railway belongs to the region it serves," with the Standards Authority pointing out that GWR was in fact owned by First Group, not the local people. Kat Hobbs, who was director of a nationalisation campaign group called We Own It, illustrated how GWR knew privatisation was so unpopular that it could score bonus points by suggesting that it was actually nationalised. The RMT also spoke out against the GWR advertising fiasco, calling it an outrageous stunt, with GWR being disappointed at the decision to ban the advertisements. In September, the first of the Class 387s began entering service on weekday peak services to Hayes and Harlington, utilising the overhead equipment which had been installed for the Heathrow Express and Heathrow Connect services. September also saw the start of the refurbishment schemes for the Class 150s, 165s, 166s and 158s, as well as some of the HST sets, which would all receive new GWR interiors, with most trains now having plug sockets, and the turbos having aircon installed. Elsewhere, in November, it was announced that the electrification of the Great Western Main Line would be suspended due to delays and cost overruns, with the budget trebling to £2.8 billion. Instead of electrifying the main line fully to Bristol, Temple Meads and Oxford, as well as the Henley and Windsor branch lines, only the line to Didcot Parkway, Cardiff and Bristol Parkway would be electrified, despite millions being spent on preparation for wires at Bath Spa and Bristol Temple Meads. Labour called the cancellation another example of a broken Tory promise on rail. December got even worse for GWR, with train cleaners striking due to unfair treatment, with GWR not paying sick pay to cleaners, meaning they had to take it out of their annual leave if sick, or not receive any pay at all. What made things worse and more unfair was that some cleaners who were directly employed by GWR, not through an agency, did receive sick pay and other benefits, whilst agency Great Western staff did not. Cleaners striked on Great Western on Christmas Eve in 2016, with the company eventually giving in to the demands. In February 2017, more bad press was given to Great Western regarding its compensation scheme, which was described as all delay and no repay. Firstly, passengers who had sent their claim by post did not receive any repay, as the address was out of date, whilst the online delay repay scheme was so busy it took GWR on average 3 weeks to respond for compensation. This left some passengers with a 2-month wait for compensation from Great Western, with passengers having to repeatedly follow up and hassle Great Western for repayments. Passengers who phoned Great Western Railway for delay repay were also charged a premium rate, unannounced to passengers. In March, there was, finally, some positive news for Great Western Railway, as its new IET bi-mode trains had completed their first full test runs from Paddington to Oxford, Bristol and Cardiff, with the new trains offering an increase in capacity and a decrease in journey times when compared to the older HST sets that they would be replacing. Elsewhere, in May, the first-class 387s entered service past Hayes and Harlington, running to Maidenhead, Reading and later Didcot in January. This marked the first time that Great Western Railway had run an electric service past Hayes and Harlington, with the new electrification finally being put to work. October 2017, however, was the big month for Great Western, with the first of the new Class 800s being brought into service, heavily delayed and over budget. The first service from Bristol to London on the 16th of October ran 41 minutes late, without air conditioning and with some carriages locked out of use due to a leak with teething problems hurting the IETs. The first service from London to Wales at 08:15 was also cancelled due to technical issues with the train, but the units did eventually reach Wales later in the day. The trains were also slandered for their poor seat comfort, despite the Department for Transport promising the trains to be more comfortable than the HSTs that they replaced, with Transport Secretary Chris Grayling describing the new trains as transformational and the best trains we have ever had in the country. Despite the increase in capacity, decrease in journey times, and the modern interiors, the trains were received poorly by passengers, who disliked the harsh lighting and poor seating arrangements. On the 17th of October, the second full day of IET operations, things also went poorly, with door faults recorded. By the 19th, Great Western and Hitachi decided to withdraw the trains to fix the technical issues before relaunching them back into service later in the year. Nonetheless, the introduction of the IETs did mean that the final Class 180 Adelantes could leave the fleet, joining Grand Central by the end of the year, with the Class 150-1s moving to Northern, whilst 4 of the 9 Class 153s ventured east, joining East Midlands trains. 2018 didn't start much better for GWR, with only 33% of passengers believing that rail fares were value for money in a national survey, with Great Western coming in as the 6th worst operator in the UK, based off passenger satisfaction. In May, TfL Rail took over all local services from Paddington to Hayes and Harlington, in preparation for the launch of the Elizabeth line, branded as TfL Rail, until 2019. In July, GWR were hit with poor publicity after a disabled woman was removed from a GWR train due to using a mobility scooter in a disabled space, despite being disabled. Tanya Lee Davis, who was Canadian, said she was humiliated by the GWR train crew, who made public announcements about her causing problems and delaying the service. Great Western did eventually apologise, suggesting that no passenger should feel humiliated when travelling on their services, especially a disabled one. July also saw Great Western slammed for poor Sunday service, with a lack of train crew, then leading to knock-on cancellations and delays to peak services on Monday mornings, with Great Western apologising to passengers regarding the poor service. August was better though, with the first-class 802s introduced. These 802s included larger batteries and diesel engines to run a purely diesel services across the network, marking the beginning of the end for the full HST sets with Great Western Railway. with some being converted to 4 and 5 car Castle class sets to run local services in Cornwall and up towards Cardiff and Worcester, with automatic sliding doors fitted. The new units were designated Class 255s and began operating in late 2018. At the same time, the first turbos were moved to local services around Bristol. Great Western Railway's focus on improving intercity services did leave some to highlight the lack of investment on branch lines. For example, earlier in 2018, Great Western was forced to apologise for terrible service on the Barnstaple line due to a lack of rolling stock, with other local branch lines being slandered for a lack of late-night services and infrequent 2-hourly services throughout the day. A new potential service to a reopened Oakhampton did bring some positivity to passengers in Devon and Cornwall, but until reliability increased, many would still be disgruntled with the operator. January 2019 saw more wires switched live on the Great Western Main Line, with trains now running under wires to Reading, Newbury, Swindon and Bristol Parkway, with Cardiff almost complete. However, it was now confirmed that wires would not reach Swansea due to cost constraints. 2019 also saw the final Class 153s withdrawn and moved to Transport for Wales and ScotRail, with the addition of the Class 387s allowing more turbos to begin replacing sprinters and pacer units. But some Class 387s wouldn't be with Great Western Railway for long, with 12 units transferring to Heathrow Express from 2019 to replace the Class 332s, which dated from 1997. December 2019 saw a crisis for Great Western Railway regarding their new December timetable. The launch of the new timetable on the 16th saw a signal failure in Slough, cancelling all services passing through the station. This affected Great Western's new flagship Bristol to London Express 0853 service. The new non-stop service would reduce times between Paddington and Bristol by 17 minutes. Most services were either cancelled or heavily delayed on the day, with several services reaching over 40 minutes delay. Even without the signal failure, passengers had issues with the new timetable, with some services having less carriages and others being slower. Regardless, the new timetable had been especially made for the new IET trains, with the final HST services running out of Paddington in May. Sadly, this new timetable wouldn't last for long. Before a certain pandemic caused some slight issues, a new station opened in February 2020. Worcestershire Parkway was opened on the 23rd of February at a crossover point between the cross-country Bristol and Cardiff trunk route, as well as the Great Western Cotswold line from Worcester to Oxford and London. A new split-level Parkway station was constructed for services to London and Worcester. The station was also built in expectation for a new 10,000 home development, which would be built nearby to the station. There was some disappointment, however, with cross-country's long-distance intercity services from Scotland and Birmingham towards Bristol in the southwest not stopping at the station, despite it initially being built to handle 9-carriage Voyager trains. Instead, the station would only receive the Class 170s on local services between Cardiff, Birmingham and Stansted Airport. The station didn't have a huge amount of time to gain passengers as, by March, a certain global pandemic had hit the UK, forcing the country into lockdown. Great Western kept their new December 2019 timetable running through into May, but in December they were forced to cut back on services due to a lack of revenue caused by a lack of passengers. Earlier in March, Great Western was bailed out by the government to ensure that they did not collapse due to the lack of revenue. £7.3 billion was spent by the government to effectively nationalise all the UK rail operators, with £70 million going directly to management bonuses and fees. In this period, Great Western were given a further extension until March 2023. 2020 did see the first Class 769 tri-mode units expected to work services from Oxford, Reading and Gatwick begin testing. The units, former Class 319 EMUs, were installed with diesel engines and could also run overhead and by third rail. The trains were fully refurbished and fitted with air conditioning, but were plagued with reliability problems and were eventually abandoned due to reliability issues and cost-cutting measures brought in due to the pandemic and state of the global economy. 2020 also saw the final Class 150-0s and Class 143 Pacers operate with Great Western. Both classes were replaced by turbos cascaded from local routes near Paddington and Oxford, with the Pacers being scrapped and the Class 150-0s sent to Northern. Going into 2021, Great Western hoped that the pandemic would begin to end and normal service would be restored. However, events in April destabilised this normal service. Cracks were discovered in April on the yaw dampers and suspension systems of the IET trains, with, initially, 8 trains withdrawn from service for repairs and investigation. By the 8th of May, Great Western Railway and 3 other operators had to withdraw from service all of their IET trains due to more cracks being found in the lifting pads near the bogies. with the trains likely to be out for a prolonged period, according to Railway Minister Chris Heaton-Harris. To cover for the lost trains, Great Western loaned 6 Class 387s from GWR Thameslink Railway, which were not needed at the time due to the suspension of Gatwick Express services, whilst C2C also loaned some of their Class 387s to Great Western, with 387s running services to Bristol for the first time. Eventually, Great Western agreed to increase inspections on lifting pads and yaw dampers, with a few units returning to service on the 13th of May. By September, all 182 trains had been thoroughly inspected, repaired and returned to service, with fatigue and corrosion the reason behind the cracks. A report released in April 2022 by the Office of Rail and Road found that trains were experiencing greater loads on the body shells due to track and wheel fatigue, with stress corrosion cracking on the lifting plate welds caused by sea salt exposure near Dawlish. All 1,247 Hitachi Class 800 carriages had parts replaced, including the addition of bolts near longitudinal welds. Things went from bad to worse for Great Western though, when, on the 31st of October 2021, a Great Western Class 158 bound for Bristol collided with a South Western Class 159 for Honiton through the Salisbury Tunnel Junction, due to low railhead adhesion, leading to the South Western Class 159 passing a signal at danger and converging with the Great Western train. Out of a total of 203 people on both trains, only 13 were injured, with the driver of the Class 159 being airlifted to hospital with life-changing injuries. The crash led to 158763 being written off for Great Western, with a focus on rail adhesion and leaves on the line by the RAIB, Rail Accident Investigation Branch. Better news occurred in November 2021 when, on the 17th, the first train ran to the new Oakhampton station in Exeter for the first time since 1972, with an, at first, 2-hourly Great Western service running to and from Exeter, with the service increased to hourly in 2022. A month later in December, Cardiff saw its half-hourly Paddington service restored for the first time since COVID-19, with an extra 18 trains reintroduced per day, with the service also being fully electric for the first time ever. 2022 saw Great Western's contract extended with a direct award running until June 2028. A month later though, Great Western were hit by rail strikes which impacted the whole of England and Wales. Strikes by the RMT and ASLEF occurred in July and June over low pay, with Great Western involved in all these strikes up until 2024, when they were resolved by the Labour government. June and July saw the final on-loan Class 387 sent back to Great Northern, with, by July, Great Western no longer needing the units. In August, it was confirmed that the new Oakhampton station had already received over 120,000 journeys since opening, significantly boosting the local economy. This number was double the expected passenger numbers, with the 11 new miles of track, 24,000 new sleepers, and 29,000 tonnes of ballast being seen as a huge success, with the new station now enjoying over 300,000 passengers per year. November saw the first of a string of major infrastructural issues on the Great Western Main Line, especially between Reading and Paddington, with the launch of the Elizabeth Line earlier in May, adding extra strain to the outdated infrastructure. Power lines came down in Slough in late November, with cracks found in the tracks near Kensal Green, causing more delays and cancellations to services. This came at the same time as a report which discovered that average rail punctuality had decreased rapidly since 2020, with Great Western's on-time score being just over 60%. Following this, a landslide near Moreton and Marsh blocked the line for several weeks, whilst more strikes occurred from the RMT and ASLEF in March. Back in February, though, Great Western brought out a number of Viva Rail assets. Viva Rail, a train manufacturer which had gone into administration in December 2022, had manufactured the Class 230 former D-stock tube train, turning the old tube train into a mainline specified unit. Great Western planned to use several Class 230s as battery trains on the Greenford branch, with 9 Viva Rail staff employed to oversee the introduction, with the units hoping to enter service in 2025. The summer of 2023 saw a string of new station openings for Great Western, with Reading Green Park, Marsh Barton in Exeter, and Portway Park and Ride near Bristol, all opening within several weeks of each other. Reading Green Park would be the third station in the town, and will serve a new development and Reading FC Stadium, with half-hourly Great Western services to Reading and Basingstoke. Marsh Barton, located on the Riviera line, would see hourly services to Exeter, Exmouth and Paignton, serving the trading estate of Marsh Barton. Finally, Portway Park and Ride, which opened in July, would serve an already built bus park and ride with trains, with the station served by services to Bristol, Avonmouth and Severn Beach. However, the winter once again saw poor reliability with the infrastructure between Paddington and Reading, with power failures, signal failures and broken tracks, causing significant issues. One particular issue, to do with damage to overhead wires near Ladbroke Grove in December, led to passengers having to evacuate trains onto the tracks themselves. Going into 2024, the new Class 230 battery train broke a UK record, travelling 86 miles through Gloucestershire, Warwickshire and Worcestershire from its base in Long Marston. Great Western was shocked at the train, with it surpassing all expectations and having enough charge to run for over 120 miles, certainly enough to cover the short Greenford branch. February saw a £140 million plan announced to tackle reliability on the Great Western Main Line between London and Reading, with Network Rail developing new devices to identify faults, as well as installing new overhead wires. July saw more positive news, with a business case to reconnect the West Somerset line with the National Rail Network finalised, with a potential cost of £6 million to get the line to Minehead reopened. September also saw the first Bristol to Oxford direct service ran in over 21 years. The service, which was axed by First Great Western Link and First Great Western back in the early 2000s, was restored over 2 return Saturday services, restoring Oxford connections for Bristol, Bath, Chippenham and Swindon. Richard Stowe, chairman of the Thames Valley Rail Future Branch, highlighted how the new service could boost the case for a new station at Wantage Grove. Furthermore, September saw the opening of another new station in Bristol, Ashley Down, which would see services on the Metro West line between Filton Abbey Wood and Bristol. In August, Rail Express formally reported plans that Great Western Railway had to introduce the former Transport for Wales Class 175 units for local services in and around Cornwall, such as the Falmouth branch. Although not a lot is known about Great Western's plans for the units thus far, they would help strengthen the fleet in the southwest, as well as potentially replacing the Class 150 and Castle class fleet. Finally, in December, the BBC reported on Great Western's terrible Sunday services, with many delays and cancellations due to lack of staff caused by the volunteering overtime rules that Sunday workings require. This means that staff have to volunteer to work on Sundays, with many staff not willing to work on Sundays during the festive period. This decision is down to the train operators themselves, as it means employing less full-time drivers, with unions such as ASLEF actually pushing for Sunday to be part of the working week, which would resolve much of the cancellations. And, with that, this brings us to the present day with Great Western Railway. So, let's answer the question, have Great Western Railway since 2015 been a success? Well, personally, I would say maybe yes. Although there have been lots of issues such as the curtailment of the electrification, cracks in the IT units, the impact of COVID-19, strikes and major infrastructural issues on the Great Western Main Line, these are not all exactly Great Western's fault, and they have just been somewhat unlucky. They have refurbished all their trains and did introduce the IETs and Class 387s, which are both now turning out to be rather reliable and good upgrades to the HST and turbo fleets after the hiccups which the IETs had during their first few years. The Class 387s are very good trains, with the potential introduction of the Class 175s and the Class 230s hopefully bring more capacity to Great Western, as well as replacing the oldest trains in their fleet. There's also been a record number of train station openings, with these being highly successful, whilst plans for new metro services in Bristol, Devon and Cornwall are currently underway. The future then does look rather bright, with nationalisation also on the horizon, potentially able to transform rail travel. But Great Western still have major reliability issues, with services on Sundays being very poor. But what do you think? Am I being too kind on Great Western or too harsh? Let me know in the comments below. And a huge thank you for watching this Western mini-series. Do subscribe to see what I have planned in the future. Special thanks to all my YouTube and Patreon members, especially my first class members Callum Martin Bell, Crispin McKee and John Williams, as well as my business zone members Andrew Bowen, Anthony Harris, Anthony James Moore, ARK, Connor Grieg, Clive's Trains and Travel, Craig Mitchell 43, Dave CDF, Gordon Walker, Jay Teco, Lewis C21, That Transport Girl, and The Average Teleporter. Get your name on this list from as little as £2.99 a month, and help me to make my videos. I really do appreciate it. Also, thanks to everyone that's let me use their footage for today's video. You can find their channels in the description or pinned comment. Once again, thanks for watching. Check out my Blue Sky, Twitter, Patreon and Discord server in the links below, and I hope to see you soon. Goodbye.